Well, in this lesson, we want to talk about what happens many times when sons and daughters are not blessed by their parents, when they're not released into their adult identity and destiny. And many times what happens is, again, people are retained in identity as children and continue to behave as children, sometimes as adults. I've had many wives that say to me, and sometimes we joke about this, I've got 5 children. 4 of them are my children. The 5th is my husband, who behaves like a child. And people laugh about that. They joke about that. But many times it's really no laughing matter, because there really is a little boy or a little girl trapped on the inside of a grown man's body or a grown woman's body. It doesn't just happen for men. It happens for women. Many times that there's a serious consequence. One woman came to me and for some counseling as a pastor, and she said, my husband and I are having a great struggle. We've been married 11 years. We want to be missionaries. We both love the Lord. We love each other, but he is driving me nuts. I said, what's the problem? She said, he just takes no responsibility around the house. He says it's his responsibility, for example, to take care of the cars, but he doesn't do it. If I didn't change the oil in the cars, he'd run them both dry until we had metal grinding on metal and froze up the engines. He says it's his responsibility to take care of the yard work, but he doesn't do it. If I didn't do it, the grass would grow up over the top of the house. He says it's his responsibility to pay the bills, but he doesn't pay the bills. So I end up paying the bills. I take care of the cars. I take care of the lawn. I take care of all these things that he says are his responsibility, but he won't do it. And when I confront him, he just sort of shrugs his shoulders and goes, I don't know why. I'll do it. I'll try to do better. But he never changes. And she says, I'm about ready to leave him. It's driving me nuts. I said, do you think he'd be open to some counsel? And she said, well, I think so. So she made an appointment for him, and he came in. And I said, brother, tell me about your marriage. How's it going? He said, well, we have our ups and downs like everybody, but we basically love each other, and, everything's going real well. I thought, wow, she's about ready to leave him, and he thinks everything's going well. I said, do you realize that your wife is thinking of leaving you? What? I know she said that sometimes when she's angry, but I didn't really believe it. I said, brother, I think you need to believe it. And I explained to him what she had said, and he sort of hung his head and said, yeah, that's true. I do have trouble getting around to those things. I said, so I first thought, maybe he needs some time management, and some goal setting. So I said, let's just take one thing. What's one thing that is important to your wife? Okay. And I can't remember what it was, pay the bills or something like that. Okay. Let's look in your schedule. When is a time when you can pay the bills? Let's find 3 times in the next week, and you're going to do this. Hopefully the first time. Okay, he said, yeah, I'll do that. So I prayed with him, and okay, you're gonna really do this. This is your goal for the week. He came back the next week. Do you think he had done his task? No, he had an excuse. Well, that night came and I had to work late, and then the next day I was at the kids' soccer game, and then he had an excuse for every day and hadn't done it. And so I thought, well, let's try again. And so we set another time for the next week. He didn't do it again, and I realized this is not a problem with goal setting and time management. There's something deep on the inside going on. So there's more than meets the eye. I said, hey, we got to pray. I mean, you're avoiding doing these things. There's some compelling force on the inside compelling you to avoid these things. Let's pray and ask God what's going on. And so we prayed. And the Lord just led me to ask him some questions. I said, what was your relationship with your dad like? Oh, it was good. I felt, always had a good relationship with my dad. And what was your relationship with your mom like? Well, nothing I ever did was right in her sight. I mean, no matter how hard I tried it never worked out. And I said, well, give me some examples. He said, well, for example, when I was a little kid, it was my job to set the table. But no matter how hard I tried, I never set the table right. And so after I'd set the table, she'd come and she'd redo it. She'd throw up her hands and go, honestly, that boy, can't you do anything right? And then she'd set the table again the correct way. I said, well, what did you do? How did you learn to cope with that? That must have been painful. He said, oh yeah, that hurt me a lot, made me feel worthless. Well, what did you do? And he thought back, he said, what I think I did is I just didn't get around to setting the table. And I said, so didn't she yell at you for that? And he said, oh yeah, she'd again, honestly, that boy, and then she'd go set the table, and then I'd be relieved from doing it wrong. And he said, I guess what actually happened is I felt like the pain of getting yelled at and being made to feel worthless for having failed and done it wrong, that the pain of failure was far greater than getting yelled at for not having done it. So he said, I guess I just didn't do it. And most of the things that she told me to do, I didn't do because I knew I was going to do them wrong. And so I guess that's what I learned to do. He said, actually, my grandma was the same way. And he said, you know, my grandma outwardly, overtly preferred girls to boys. He said, I remember one time going to my grandma's house, and she said she'd give us a penny for every weed we pulled up from her garden. So he said, I pulled up 10 weeds, and my sister pulled up 10 weeds. My grandmother, we laid them out on the sidewalk. My grandmother came out to inspect them, and she looked at my sister's weeds and said, good job, and gave her 10 pennies. She looked at my weeds, which as far as I know were the exact same as my sister's, and she said, well, you didn't really get any of the roots, and gave me no pennies. And so I realized you can't ever please your mom or your grandma. No matter what you do, you're going to do it wrong, and so there's just no point, I guess, in doing it. And I saw, you know, clearly what the pattern was. Obviously, he had learned that avoiding things that he was afraid he was going to do wrong would spare him from the embarrassment and the shame and the pain of being ridiculed for having done it wrong. I said, so I think what really happened is in your heart, you judged your mom. He said, yeah, I did. He said, I was angry with her. I hated her really growing up, but you know, I forgave her years ago. I said, well, what kind of a woman did you look for to marry? He said, well, that's easy. One that was not like my mom, you know, one that just accepted me and loved me for who I am and didn't criticize and judge me. I said, did you find a woman like that? He said, oh yes, absolutely I did. And I married her. That's my wife, he said. I said, is she like that now? He said, no, actually she's pretty much just like my mom now. She pretty much criticizes and berates me for everything. And I said, can you see what you've done to your wife? You've turned your wife into your mother. She wasn't like that. See, when you met her, she was accepting and loving, but there's a deep fear in your heart that she's going to find out what a failure you are. And so you do with your wife exactly the same as what you did with your mother. You just avoid doing anything because you're afraid that you're going to do it wrong and she's going to criticize you. You left her only one of three choices. She can nag you and say, do it. You said you were going to do it. When are you going to do it? And that's one option. Second option, she can just let the grass grow up over the house, let the cars be destroyed, let the house be repossessed because nobody pays the bills. Or the third option, she can step in and do it herself. And what she's chosen to do up till now is step in and do these things herself. And that lets you off the hook, which is why you think your marriage is great, and she's going nuts. And I said, brother, here's what happened. Your mother cursed you rather than blessed you, imparted to you that you're worthless, that you can't do anything right, and you received that lie in the depths of your heart, and you believe that, and now you're viewing your wife through the image of your mother that's stuck in your heart because of bitterness. In Hebrews chapter 15, verse 12, it's the opposite, chapter 12, verse 15, says that be careful not to allow bitterness to get in your heart because it will defile many. And now your wife is being defiled by the bitterness that's been in your heart toward your mom. And see, the consequence of your mom cursing you rather than blessing you is now your marriage is about to be destroyed because you never went back and got free of that. You never dealt with the shame, the bitterness, the anger in your heart, the lack of blessing in your heart towards your mom. So what I'm talking about is the fact that there are consequences generationally to a lack of blessing. Here was a mom that didn't understand blessing and cursed her son continually, made him feel worthless, told him that he was no good, that he couldn't ever amount to anything, that he never did anything right. And they didn't have a weekly time of blessing in their family where he could share his heart. When his mom would look him in the eyes, she'd find out there was distance, there was a wall. She could ask what happened, repent and ask forgiveness. They didn't have a time like that. So what happened is he never got free, and it continued to destroy his marriage. Well, once we discovered that, then we could pray, and I took him through a process that we call Jesus Wonderful Counselor. I just brought him into the presence of Jesus the Wonderful Counselor, who identified the lie, removed it, replaced it with the truth that he is valuable, rather than the prophetic lie that his mother imparted to him, that he's worthless and he's going to do everything wrong. And it was life-changing for him. And totally, he began to take responsibility. He began to take care of the yard and the bills and the cars and all that sort of thing, much to his wife's delight. And she got back the man that she thought she married again. So that's the awesome process that we always take people through in our weekend events and our schools of ministry, training people for ministry to teach them that process. But that's not our goal right now in this course. I just wanted to share that example that there is a consequence for lack of blessing from one generation to the next. Noel and Phil Gibson, authors, wrote a book called Evicting Demonic Squatters and Breaking Bondages. They quote some really interesting statistics about two families from 200 years ago. These are two American families that were contemporaries, lived at the same time. The first one I'm going to talk about is Max Jukes. Now, history is not noted with Max Jukes with greatness. Most people have never heard of Max Jukes. He was an atheist. He married a godless woman. Some 560 descendants were traced over 200 years of time. Remember that number, 560 descendants. What happened to the descendants of Max Jukes? Well, it turns out 310 died as paupers. 310 died in poverty. 150 became criminals. 7 of them were murderers. 100 were known drunkards. Half the women were prostitutes. The descendants of Max Jukes cost the United States government more than $1.25 million in 19th century dollars. Now, that'd probably be upwards of, $300, $400 million today just to incarcerate and try the descendants of Max Jukes. Now, on the other hand, there was a man called Jonathan Edwards. He was a contemporary, lived at the same time as Max Jukes. Jonathan Edwards is a man many people have heard of. He was a committed Christian. He gave God first place in his life. He married a godly young lady, and some 1,394 descendants were traced. Now remember, how many did Max have? 560. Jonathan, 1,394, 2.5 times almost the number of descendants of Jonathan as opposed to Max. Now what happened to Jonathan's descendants? 295 graduated from college, of whom 13 became college presidents. 65 became professors. 3 were elected as U.S. senators, and another 3 were governors. Others were ministers to foreign nations. 30 were judges, 100 were lawyers, 1 was the dean of an outstanding law school, 56 practiced as physicians, 1 was the dean of a medical school, 75 became officers in the military, 100 were well-known missionaries, preachers, and prominent authors. Another 80 held some form of public office, of whom 3 were mayors of large cities. 1 was the controller of the U.S. Treasury. Another was vice president of the United States. Not one of the descendants of Jonathan Edwards ever was a liability to the U.S. government or cost the U.S. government anything. Isn't that a contrast in blessing and cursing generationally over many, many generations? You see, each one of these men, Jonathan Edwards and Max Jukes, had seed on the inside. They deposited their seed of either blessing or cursing in the lives of their children, and it passed down from generation to generation. It made it almost impossible and a huge stumbling block and hindrance for the descendants of Max Jukes to prosper, to be able to fulfill the destiny God had for them. On the other hand, Jonathan Edwards opened doors for his family to prosper spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially, in their families, in every area of life. And so we see that parents hold a key that either cripples their children or empowers their children to prosper in their future life. And Max Jukes and Jonathan Edwards is just a powerful, powerful reminder. I know some of us listening think, dear God, I mean, you read those things, that Max Jukes guy, he was probably my great-great-grandfather himself. I mean, I look back in past generations and I see people with mental illness, criminals, people that were prostitutes, people that were thieves, murderers, whatever, dishonest people. What chance have I got? Here's the good news. The very fact that you're watching this course today is indicative of the fact that apparently God chose you in this generation to make you the first Jonathan Edwards of your lineage. And if you would see a genogram, coming down in a Max Jukes line, hits your generation and shifts over to here, and a new generation is started. You see, you have an opportunity to take different seed than perhaps has been coming down your lineage and sow that into your children. To me, that is so exciting to know that your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren won't have to struggle with the same kind of iniquities, the same kind of stumbling blocks and hindrances that have been in your past generations. And then others of us are riding on a wave of blessing from the past. We look back in past generations and see godly people, see Jonathan Edwards type people in our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents generation, and we realize, wow, I'm riding on a wave of blessing that I did not work for. There are certain things that are easy in my life that many other people struggle with, and I realize I didn't work for that. I didn't deserve that. It's just a generational blessing. It's seed that has come down and is bearing fruit in my life, something I didn't work for, I didn't plan, but just blessing coming down from generation to generation. So what I'm saying is it doesn't matter which way it is in your family. You might be from a Max Jukes generation of people, or you might be from a Jonathan Edwards generation of people, or a mixture. The point is this: you get to choose regarding your children. What seed are you going to sow into the lives of your children? The seed of blessing or the seed of cursing? It's your choice. Remember, we read that, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. I set before you this day life and death, the blessing and the curse, but you get to choose. And so we're learning in this course how to choose blessing, how to release our children into blessing. Now, let me just touch one more thing. What are some of the consequences that we see of people that have never been blessed? What happens to them? Well, they try to bless themselves. They try to release themselves into their own identity and destiny. They make themselves their own authority. Here's some things I've seen some people do. Some young guys will join a gang. What is a gang? It's really a surrogate family. There's a rite of passage. There's a way to become a man, a way to become a woman. You do something powerful and you're acknowledged as a part of the gang. You're acknowledged as a man or as a woman. So people join gangs. Other people try to become, heroes in some way, do some great feat. Other people try to make lots of money, attain some high position. If I can attain a high enough position, I'll make this feeling of being worthless go away somehow. Or if I can somehow or another make enough money, people will respect me and they will honor me and I'll be a valuable person. None of it works, because the problem is internal. It's a lie in the depths of the heart that has been deposited there by the enemy through cursing many times of parents or other significant people in our lives. Some men think, well, if I conquer women sexually, I'll be a man. No, that's a little boy in a man suit who's insecure, trying to find his identity through others, rather than realizing, no, I am secure. I don't have to do anything to prove that I'm a man. Some women look to a man, if I could just attract some incredible guy to be interested in me, that would prove to me that I'm a real woman. Again, an insecure little girl living in a woman's body, trying to release herself into her adult identity. And God never intended that. That's a consequence of lack of blessing that happens to many, many people. And women will do some of the same things that I just mentioned, or try to make enough money, attain a high position, do something powerful, become super mom, all kinds of things to somehow make that feeling I'm just a dumb little kid go away. These are the consequences of not being blessed. I don't want that for your children. And that's why I'm teaching this course. And I'm so excited that your children will not have to experience many of these kinds of things. An interesting book that I read just recently was written by a secular psychologist, two of them actually, William Farrell and John Gray. It's called The Boy Crisis. The Boy Crisis. And what this is talking about, what these two secular psychologists have learned is that In the United States and probably around the world, there is a crisis among boys going on right now, that boys are behind girls in every area. And I'll tell you the bottom line that the secular psychologist concludes is that the problem is fatherlessness. Lack of blessing of a father is creating a crisis for young men in our nation. Here's what is incredible. He talks about especially suburban white males are really plagued with this, and that the suicide rate among young white males is now exceeding the homicide rate among young black males who are in gangs in the inner city. And so young men are killing themselves because of the worthlessness, because they can't make that feeling, I have no place, I have no value, go away. And Dr. Farrell's conclusion is that is as a result of fatherlessness. So he is saying the areas in which boys are lagging behind girls in their physical health, in their finances, in their education, in emotional maturity. Boys are lagging way behind. Here's an interesting educational statistic. In the 1980s, 69% of the people graduating from college were men, 31% were women. Do you know in 2019 or 2020, I can't remember which, that statistic is reversed to where 69% of the people graduating from university in the United States will be women, 31% will be men. So that's completely reversed. Women are having better opportunities in the workforce. Women have better opportunities in education. They're much more emotionally aware. Boys are lagging behind in so many areas. On page 118 of this book, Dr. Farrell identifies 15 different areas that are affecting young men as a result of lack of impartation of blessing from their fathers. School achievement is lower. Here's what he says. Let's start with 15 things that are more generally applicable to your son's life. And he's talking about when the dad is absent, when there's not impartation from the dad. School achievement goes down. The 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, goes down. Much higher rate of school dropouts, higher unemployment, higher suicide, higher involvement with drugs, homelessness, bullying, victimization, violent crime, rape, poverty and mobility, hypertension, lack of trust, lack of empathy. Here's the most amazing thing Dr. Farrell identified. He said that high 90% of the ISIS fighters, the young men in the Middle East who joined ISIS, are fatherless. What are they looking for? Releasing themselves into their adult identity and destiny to become significant, to do something important, because there was no impartation of blessing from a father. I can't remember the exact, 97, 98% of the ISIS fighters are fatherless. Here's the amazing thing. Abuse that happens, for example, with priests in the church. Do you know that high 90% of the abusers are fatherless? No blessing from a father. Here's an interesting statistic. Who are the boys that get abused? Who are the victims? Mostly boys with no fathers, again, no impartation of blessing. So the bullies are fatherless. The victims are fatherless. Again, high correlation of people involved in rape and violent crimes, those that are committing these crimes, fatherless. People already know the huge statistics of incarceration and prisons, that the vast majority of people that find themselves in prison have had no blessing from a father, no impartation of blessing. So what we see is that incredible lack of blessing results in results in higher incidence of suicide, incarceration, school dropouts, divorce, alcoholism, drug addictions, bullying, being bullied, victimized, rape, all kinds of horrible things. And it's very interesting. Dr. Farrell's solution, and he is not a man of faith that I know of, or he doesn't represent himself to be, but the solution of a secular psychologist is that fathers need to be involved in the lives of their sons. And he suggests they have a once a week time together as a family, and he describes deep impartation from a father to the son. He doesn't use the word blessing, but that is exactly what he's describing, is that there needs to be impartation of blessing from a father to their sons. And that's what would eliminate the boy crisis. So the boy crisis going on in the United States and around the world is as a result of lack of blessing of fathers to their sons. And this is very, very interesting to me when this is not a man that has been known as a Bible scholar or somebody that is, has been pursuing a lifestyle as a Christian, at least not that he professes that, but this is a secular psychologist. And so when sociology and psychology is confirming what the Bible already told us are ancient paths. And see, when we depart from the ancient paths, we get far away from what God planned for us, far away from what God had in mind. We destroy our own families, we destroy generations, we destroy our own society, which is why the prophetic word came through Jeremiah: stand by the ways and see, and ask for the ancient paths where the good way is, walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. That's what God's plan was, is that we would be at peace, we would be at rest, rather than all the time striving to become somebody because I feel so worthless on the inside, because there was never God's impartation of identity and destiny coming from God through a father, through a mother, that answers those two identity questions. And so many people have gotten the devil's answer in their heart: you're worthless, you have no value, you'll never amount to anything, nobody will ever love you. And that results in, instead of a peace in the heart, it results in turmoil and striving and trying to do something to become valuable. And it goes on and on and on. So I hope you're getting motivated to understand you hold a key for your son's life. You hold a key for your daughter's life. And again, you might be thinking, if you're advanced in age and your children are already out of the house, wow, I wish I would have known this when my children were little. Hey, it doesn't matter when you start now. And if you don't even have children yet, you're recently married, or you have small children, you get an opportunity to implement these things from the beginning. But my point is, it doesn't matter when you start. We can change this so that our children don't have to be the Max Jukes generation. Our children can be the Jonathan Edwards generation that are empowered to be the top of their fields, to be the top entertainers and the top politicians and the top scientists and doctors and screenwriters and influencers, novel writers, influencers in our culture. That's what God has planned for our children. And it's like there is a destiny birthed in heaven that God has released like a television wave onto planet Earth. He's just waiting to connect with a television receiver, which is what a parent is. Someone who receives what God has beamed out of heaven and begins to manifest it in prophetic utterance and impartation to a son and daughter, which is what we're calling blessing. Imparting to the life of your son or daughter who God says they are, and releasing them into their future identity and future destiny. And it's such a powerful thing when we begin to understand the key that we hold in our hands as parents, that we can change this. So you can see some of the consequences of not being blessed, and I'm so glad to share this with you now, that your children will not have to endure these consequences. And I really believe that there will be grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren that will come to you in heaven and thank you for learning how to become an agent of blessing and how to create a culture of blessing. Let me just review again the two key components of a culture of blessing we've talked about so far. One is a weekly time of blessing, impartation into the lives and hearts of your sons and daughters. The second one is to plan a time to release a boy to be a man, a girl to be a woman, to have a public prophetic impartation ceremony where we release our sons to be men and our daughters to be women. And let's make this normal in our culture of faith community, our church or our congregation where we meet, that this would become normal, that it would not be possible to grow up in a congregation without having a powerful impartation that releases a boy to be a man and a girl to be a woman, and a weekly impartation of blessing And so I'm so excited for you. And again, I'm proud of you for pursuing this information, pursuing this course, and not just listening to it, but being a doer of the Word and implementing it in your family now. I'd like to just pray for you as we conclude this session. Father, I thank you for every dad, every mom going through this course. Lord, I pray that not only would you open our eyes and our ears, but God, that you would give us revelation of the power we hold, the keys we have in our hands to bless our own sons and daughters. And Father, for everyone facing difficult situation with sons and daughters, Father, I just pray for a powerful impartation that you would use us, God, as dads and moms to be able to bless our sons and daughters and release them into the destiny that is waiting to manifest through them. So Father, I pray, powerfully use us in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.